This conference is being recorded. Only the main conference is recorded.
All right, hello everyone and welcome to My Vote Counts, a weekly session where we talk about all things Michigan elections. My name is Sarah Reinhardt and I'm a director at the Michigan Department of State, and I will serve as your host for today's session. All right, so today's session, we will be talking about what happens after polls close on August 2nd. And before we dive into today's presentation, I will go over a few important election dates for everyone who is here today to keep in mind. So the statewide primary election is actually 1 week from today on Tuesday, August 2nd. Remember that polls will open from 7 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m. The statewide general election will be Tuesday, November 8th, and polls will open 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. So for the statewide primary election on Tuesday, August 2nd, the last day for anyone to register to vote online has already passed. That was July 18th. So if anyone wants to register to vote now, you still can do that. You just have to visit your local designated clerk's office. The recommended date to request an absentee ballot and return it by mail was also July 18th. And that is because we want to make sure that everyone receives their absentee ballot or can send it back to be received in time. And both of those deadlines have passed. So let's talk about what's upcoming. You can vote early in person with an absentee ballot at your city or township clerk's office through 4 p.m. Monday, August 1st. You can return your signed absentee ballot by hand or to a drop box or your local clerk's office, and it must be received by 8 p.m. on election day. And you can register to vote in person at your city or township clerk's office by 8 p.m. on election day, because Michigan is a same-day registration state. So a few more details about primary elections before we dive in, just as a general reminder and helpful information for everyone to know. For a primary election, which is what we have next Tuesday, candidates from each political party are nominated for the general election during the primary election. So in a primary, voters may only vote for candidates representing one political party. And in Michigan, voters may participate in the primary for any party, regardless of a voter's political affiliation. And you do not need to be registered with that party in order to cast a ballot for them. And Michigan, as we just went over, has a primary election on August 2nd. And remember, polls are open at 7 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m. Don't forget, michigan.gov/vote is your one-stop shop for all elections information. By visiting michigan.gov/vote, you can update your voter information, you can check your registration status, you can ask for and track the status of your absentee ballot, you can view a sample ballot, and you can find your local clerk's office and polling place, which is critical information for anyone who plans to vote in next Tuesday's election. All right, so now we'll dive into today's session topic, what happens after polls close. And I will hand it off to Keela Crane to introduce herself and to tell us a little bit about what happens after polls close.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Keela Crane, Deputy Legal Director for the Michigan Department of State and Secretary of State, Dustin Pitton. And today we would like to talk to you a little bit about what happens when the polls do close at 8 p.m. on next Tuesday, August 2nd. So at the time that the polls do close, the precinct chairperson, so the chair of the election inspectors, we will make an announcement that the polling has, or the election day has concluded. And there should be somebody that will stand at the end of the line at 8 p.m. So all voters that were in line at 8 p.m. are entitled to vote, no matter how long that takes. For example, in the 2020 presidential primary election, I was there until 10 p.m. on that date, because that's how long it took for all the people that were in line at 8 p.m. to be able to cast their ballot. So if you are in line at 8 p.m. when polls do close, you're entitled to vote, so long as you stay in line. So what does the transparency look like when the polls do close? So there's public observation, poll watchers, those people who are election challengers, and members of the public may observe the poll closing process from an area outside of the processing area. Public posting of the vote total. So once the vote total has concluded, there will be a public posting of that vote total by the election inspector, and copies of the totals will be taped onto a door or a window for members of the public to be able to see. Also, of course, as during the day while polls are open, polling staff will make sure that order is maintained as they wrap up the day, and any type of unruly observers will be asked to leave the premises. So once the polls do close at 8 p.m., the election inspectors will verify that all ballots, except the provisional ballots, have been tabulated.
And just as a recap to everyone from one of our past presentations, if you're wondering what a tabulator is after completing a ballot, voters must insert their ballot into the tabulator machine for processing. So it's the machine at your polling place that you insert your ballot into at the end of casting your ballot.
Thanks, Sarah. And I do apologize for the background noise. I'm just in an area where I can't prevent it at this time, so I do apologize. So checking the provisional ballots, election inspectors will verify that all of the provisional ballot forms are properly recorded and sealed in the provisional storage envelope. Those are separated out from the ballots that were the regular ballots that were cast on election day. And so after that, there will be a ballot summary report. So election inspectors will use the e-poll book software to generate a report. So they're looking at the total number of the ballots that were assigned to the precinct, how they were used, so that they can make sure that all the numbers match up with the amount of votes that were cast, as well as the potential amount of voters that came through the polling location on election day. And this gives you a little bit of a visual of how that works. So they look at, on the e-poll book, they look at the number of, well, not on the e-poll book, but they look at the number of ballots that were tabulated, plus the number of provisional ballots that were cast by residents. That should equal the number of voters that came through the polling location on election day that is provided by the e-poll book. And so the election inspectors and all of the poll workers are making sure that those numbers match as they shut down the polling location on election day.
Thanks, Keela. And just so everyone's aware, closed captioning is available for today's presentation within the Zoom settings. You should be able to click the More button and click the Show Subtitle, and it will display closed captioning for today's event.
So at times, A and B doesn't always equal C. And so there may be a discrepancy that the election inspectors need to rectify. So what do? They will look at the e-poll book. They will review any absent ballots that were processed. They will review the provisional ballots to make sure that that number of provisional ballots that were issued is subtracted from the total number in the e-poll book. They also will look to see if potentially any ballots were missed. And from all of that, they will continue to go through these steps that are outlined in the manual that all election inspectors receive to ensure that the numbers do match up before they shut down that polling location. So all of those steps are taken to make sure that they can equal, if the A and B does in fact equal C. So additional closing tasks that the election inspectors do is to make sure that all the valid write-in votes are properly entered into the e-poll book. They look at the election inspector completion certificates to make sure that that process is completed out. And then also they look at the tabulator tapes that come from the tabulator to make sure that during that process that they sign those. They also make sure that all of the unused ballots, including the vote against this terminal ballots, are sealed in proper containers. And then the tabulator memory device is placed also into an approved and sealed transfer container. Just one moment for me.
No problem, Keela, I can take this slide. So after the polls are closed, we get a lot of questions about how materials are transported. Materials like ballots or other supplies used by election inspectors. All materials are packed up and all the reports must be transported to a receiving board by 2 election inspectors. One election inspector that transports must be affiliating as Republican and one must be affiliating as Democrat. They have to be from 2 separate party affiliations to ensure that there's representation there when materials and ballots are transported.
Thanks, Sarah. And so there's also a receiving board. Now there's receiving boards and then there are counting boards. This is a receiving board that each local commission is responsible for ensuring. And so once the polling locations are shut down, then all of these secured materials go back to the receiving board. And all of the ballot containers are delivered to the clerk's office after the polls close in secure tamper-proof boxes. And then the sealed numbers are properly recorded for those boxes. The number of names entered into the e-poll book balance and they make sure that the names entered into the e-poll book balances with the number of ballots counted in the precinct. So there's additional checks once all of the secured information goes back to the receiving board. And though it's kind of small, you see this receiving board checklist. So it's a very thorough process that the receiving board goes through when they receive the information from the local precincts.
Thanks, Keela. I was going to point that out too. It's really a very thorough checklist and process.
Yeah, this is a frequent question that we get. Why should you not expect results on election day? Now, depending on the volume of people that have participated in the election, you may not actually receive the results right there on August 2nd. Why? In Michigan, we cannot start tabulating absentee ballots until the day of the election. There are some states that allow tabulation before election day. Ours is not one of them. So if you are in a larger jurisdiction, it takes a while for them to go through that process, along with any type of military and overseas voters that are also casting their absentee ballots. So it takes a little bit. Smaller jurisdictions or people or places where not a lot of people voted that day, obviously, it takes less time to go through. So when you have a high volume election, as we hope that all elections have a high volume of participants in our state, it just takes time. And of course, the information that you receive whenever the tabulation is done is not official. The official results for any election does not occur until the results have been canvassed both by the local canvassing on the county level, as well as the state board of canvassers. That happens a couple of weeks after the election day, a couple of weeks after election day.
Thanks, Keela. And we'll get into the canvassing process a little later in our presentation as well.
And why does it seem like election results have changed long after polls close? Well, it's not that necessarily that they change, it's that more precincts are able to put their information out there that they have completed. So more jurisdictions are able to report their results. So as more and more jurisdictions complete their results, that means that they're able to be into the bucket of other jurisdictions that already completed their results, and then the official totals are able to be updated in real time. So it's not as if people's intention on voting has changed. It is that some of the mid-sized and larger jurisdictions are catching up with some of the smaller jurisdictions, and that's why the results of the vote as a whole is being processed. So it takes time, again, to get all of this process done, but we want to make sure that we get it right, not get it finished quickly. And as Sarah stated, this is one of the last parts of the election process after the polls close. It's the certification process. So as you all know, and as we've talked about over the weeks, we are a very decentralized election state. So we go from the citizens up to the statewide process. And so on the city and township level, there's a board of canvassers, and they are certifying that elections were conducted in an appropriate fashion. And then that goes to the county board of canvassers. They certify the elections on the county level, and then it goes to the state board of canvassers, and the state board of canvassers certifies the election for the statewide. And that's the point in time when the election is actually the election results are actually official once the state board of canvassers have officially certified the election. And of course, all along the way, each board of canvassers is created by an equal number of the two major parties in our state, which happen to be the Democrat and the Republican Party. So there's two members of each affiliation on the board of canvassers. Michigan law does require that each step of the way, that each board does certify the election. If they fail to certify the election, that can be held as a dereliction of their duty to certify. And so we want to make sure that the information is presented to the board does go through and then certifies the election. And there may be litigation to require the board to certify any election if necessary. So what happens to provisional ballots? So step back, and what is a provisional ballot? That's a question that was raised by some of you all in the chat. So what a provisional ballot is The provisional ballot process was created from the Help America Vote Act. And that allows people who may have come into a polling place, but they were not actually assigned to that precinct. And for a person who appears, but they're not registered to vote in the jurisdiction. So they cast a different type of ballot called a provisional ballot that has all the people on a regular ballot on there. However, they have to cure that ballot. So they would have to go back to their local clerk and provide documentation that shows that they had the right to vote in that ballot on election day, as well as they were, if necessary, registered to vote on election day. And then that ballot will be counted. So that is separated out from the general ballots that are tabulated on election day. If they do not cure the ballot before the 6 days are up, then that ballot will not count. The good news is that if you think that you are not in the correct precinct or that you may not be registered to vote in that jurisdiction, Michigan, as Sarah said earlier, is a same day voter registration state. So you can go to your local clerk's office, register to vote, and you can decide to cast an absentee ballot right there on election, right there at your local clerk's office, or you can go to your actual precinct using a slip and go vote that same day. So there's really in Michigan now no need to cast a provisional ballot because of the other measures that we have in place to ensure that everybody's able to cast a ballot. However, if you do find yourself that you, for some reason, have to cast a provisional ballot, that is how that process works. So it's after election day, you must cure your ballot if you're voting a provisional ballot only. Then lastly, audits. All of our elections are audited on the local level as well as the state level. On the local level, the county clerks coordinate the audits with the local jurisdictions. The audit typically happens in a public location. And as a subject of the audit, the local clerk and the county clerk must provide all materials needed to conduct that audit. And then there are state level audits. State level audits is conducted by our Bureau of Elections here at the Department of State. And what the Bureau of Elections does is that they will randomly select precincts and contests, meaning a contest for governor, contest for county sheriff, whichever. And then those races will be audited and those precincts will be audited. So there is a duality of audits that happen both on the local level as well as on the state level. A frequent question that we receive here at the Department of State is there a forensic audit? That does not exist in Michigan election law. Forensic audit is a technical term that is utilized by accountants, and it does not exist in a Michigan election law. So we have different types of audits that we do to ensure that your election process was smooth, secure, and accurate. And during the post-election audits, here are some of the things that are examined. We examined the election notice. Did members of the public receive ample information about when and where the election will occur? Election inspector training. What were the election inspectors informed of how to conduct their the election at the polling location? Election inspector appointments, who was appointed there, e-poll book security, making sure that it was indeed safe and secure for the poll books, test procedures, military and overseas voter applications. Federal law governs how we must ensure that members of the military and Michigan residents who may live overseas are able to cast their ballots in our elections. So we go through that process to make sure that that was done accurately. And then also reviewing the poll book and ballot containers used, making sure that all of those things adhere to state and federal laws. And there is a checklist that those who are engaged in that audit go through. Finally, in the last step of the audit is to review voter ballots with a hand tally of selected content. So when necessary, there is a hand count. There's a hand conducted audit. And so we do a hand tally process, and that has been done before. And one person counts the ballots, a second person will observe to ensure that the two ballots are not stuck together and that the count is accurate. And those folks go through that to make sure that the numbers, like we talked about before, do add up. And that is an additional security measure that occurs in select contests.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Keela. I know that learning about auditing processes might not always be the most entertaining thing to learn about, but we do get a lot of questions about them here at the Department of State. So thank you so much for sharing about those processes and what happens after polls close. So as always, for our sessions, we had a lot of you submit some questions before today's session when signing up. So we're going to go through a few of those questions now, and we'll also get to as many questions that you've submitted live during today's session as possible. We may not get to all the questions just because we do have some time constraints, but we'll get to as many as possible. And we'll also circulate some follow-up information to everyone attending today's session after it concludes. So let me pull up a list of today's questions. All right, let's start with the first one. Keela, can you address the updates to rules regarding challengers, especially how they will apply to those inside any absentee ballot counting room?
So the Bureau of Elections has issued some instructions. I wouldn't call them those, but it have issued instructions that clarify the types of challenges that a person may make when absentee ballots are being processed or they're being tabulated. So the instructions can prevent challengers from making indiscriminate challenges or making challenges that are designed to slow down the process of tabulation or for any other improper purpose. There also is a sequestration requirement, and that's not something that is new, of course. Under Michigan law, it is required that for the AV boards to sequester. So once tabulation begins in an AV counting board, then everybody must stay inside. So you can't come in and out during that process. So that's people who are counting, that is the challengers, that is any type of poll watchers, can't come in and out. They must also ensure that their phones are locked up too, to make sure that that process is safe and secure as possible.
Wow. So sequestration then is they go in a room and they stay in a room until the process is done, essentially. Interesting.
Right, for no matter how long it takes.
Great. All right, next question. Do election inspectors ever change votes after the polls close, and what prevents this from happening?
No, they cannot change votes. That would be illegal. What does happen under Michigan law, however, is that an election inspector may duplicate a ballot if there are stray marks, or the ballot lacks the clarity about the voter's decision. For example, if at first I marked that I wanted to vote for Mickey Mouse, but I clearly crossed that out and said, no, I didn't mean Mickey Mouse. I want to vote for Minnie Mouse. Then an election inspector may be able to duplicate that ballot so that the voter's clear intention to vote for Minnie Mouse is correct on that ballot, and that would be tabulated. That way there's no confusion about the voter's intention. So you're not changing a vote, you are ensuring that the voter's intention is clear and that person is able to cast a ballot that they chose to do. Also, sometimes the ballots are crumpled or otherwise not be able to smoothly go into the tabulator. And so we want to make sure that voters' intentions are able to be processed on election day. So again, no, an election inspector cannot, should not, and it's illegal to change somebody's vote.
That's interesting. And the duplication process, another kind of check and balance for that is that two election inspectors affiliating with different parties, so the two dominant parties in Michigan being Republican and Democrat, must observe the duplication process so you can make sure no shenanigans happen. All right, next question. Does every jurisdiction use the same type of container to store ballots? I know we talked a lot earlier about transport of ballots and the containers during the audit. So do they have to use the same type?
No, just like the types of election marking tools that each jurisdiction uses is different. There's 3 different types that we use in Michigan. It's the same thing with the containers that are used to transport it over to the clerk's office. There are different types, but every container that is used has been approved by the Bureau of Elections and that county's board of canvassers for that particular jurisdiction. So they're all secure. They all have been approved, but they may not be the same in Washington County as they are for Kent County.
Interesting. All right, next question. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but who is allowed to transport ballots and what happens to them after results are announced?
So election inspectors are the ones that actually transport them from the precinct over to the clerk's office. So only the election inspectors and members of the clerk staff, if necessary, are the ones that transport ballots.
Right. All right, here's a good question we get a lot. If I'm in line to register to vote by 8 p.m. at my clerk's office, can I still cast a ballot after the polls are closed?
Yes. If you're in line at 8 p.m., and there'll be somebody, like we talked about earlier, there'll be somebody behind the very last person that is in line at 8 p.m. So all those persons that are in line at 8 p.m. are able to register to vote and to cast their ballot via absentee, of course, at the clerk's office. But you must be in line at 8 p.m.
Great. All right, next question. Do all polling places follow the same closing process after polls close?
Yes, there is one standard of how There's one standard by how all polling locations must shut down their locations, and every polling location has to go by the same type of a checklist and procedures to shut down their polling location. So yes.
Great. Okay, next question. Why would election challengers or poll watchers not be admitted to or be ejected from a polling place after close?
So it's more so the question about be ejected, because election challengers and poll watchers are be able to admit it, whether they are coming from a political party or they're coming from a nonprofit organization. However, they must abide by the rules to make sure that they are not intimidating or otherwise making it difficult for the election inspectors to do their job, for voters to be able to cast their ballots without intimidation, and that they're not threatening staff or other members of the public. So long as they are abiding by the rules of being an election, a challenger or a poll watcher, they're able to stay in the polling location even after polls close. But if they make it difficult for the election inspectors to do their job or acting in a way that is intimidating, then they will be asked to be removed from the area. Should they refuse to comply, of course, to leave the area once being asked so by the chief election inspector, then we will ask law enforcement to assist.
Okay. Can a ballot be challenged after the polls close?
Yes. So if there is, and it happens rarely, but if a challenge ballot was put, if a challenger challenged their voters' ability to cast a ballot at the particular precinct, then they may need to go to court in order to challenge that ballot should not be cast or should not be counted rather. But that is the only type of challenge that is allowed under the law.
Right. And I see a lot of questions in the Q&A about challengers and poll watchers. What are the difference and who can sign up? And I would refer some of those individuals to our presentation that we held last Tuesday, which was about voting in your polling place, where we talked about challengers and watchers and election observers and some of the rules surrounding those. And speaking of our presentation that we held last Tuesday, there was a question that was asked that Megan Shar, who hosted last week, was about to answer when her connection went out. So I've welcomed her back today to answer what that question is. And that question is, what should I do if my vote is challenged? Megan?
Thank you, Sarah. So if a challenge to a voter's eligibility occurs and you are there voting on election day and a challenger is questioning whether or not you are eligible to vote, the process looks like this. The election inspector will pull you aside and will swear you in following an oath. So you're going to swear that you are telling the truth about the questions asked. Then that election inspector is going to ask you questions that are necessary to confirm that you meet the criteria to be a voter in that precinct. So that may be whether your address is in the area for that precinct and other questions to determine your eligibility. If after you've been questioned, you confirm that you are eligible to vote, then you're going to cast your ballot and put that in a tabulator just as anyone else would. So you still get to vote, your vote still counts, and it's going to go in the tabulator with everyone else's. If for some reason you refuse to be questioned under oath, or you're not able to confirm your eligibility, then you are unable to cast a ballot at that point. All of this should be done aside from other voters, and election inspectors are advised that they must do this in a manner that does not humiliate or degrade or embarrass any challenged voter. So you should be pulled aside, and this should be handled privately and out of earshot from other voters. So as long as you are able to confirm your eligibility, you're going to get to place your ballot in the tabulator and it'll be counted along with everyone else's.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate you joining us today to answer that question. We do have one more question that was submitted prior to today's session, and then we'll get into a few of the questions that have been submitted live. So this question actually harks back to a presentation that we had 2 Tuesdays ago about absentee ballots. But we want to make sure we get to it today because the absentee ballot request option is a looming deadline. So the question is, I have always voted absentee for the past 9 years, but I have not received anything in the mail. What should I do? And is it too late to vote absentee?
So definitely, want to say sorry that you have not received that, but there is still time for you to be able to cast your ballot. So 2 things that you need to do fairly quickly. You have until this Friday by 5 p.m. to request an absentee ballot to be mailed to your home. Now, we do recommend that you go to the clerk's office to request and potentially even complete your absentee ballot right there at the clerk's office, but it's your choice. So you have the right to go and request a absentee ballot to be mailed to you by 5 p.m. this Friday. If you decide that you want to go in person to the clerk's office, you have until 4 p.m. on Monday to go to the clerk's office, but you must stay there and cast your ballot at the clerk's office on Monday, and that's by 4 p.m. So those are your 2 options. Time is ticking away, so you do have the ability to still cast your ballot if you'd like to do so via an absentee ballot.
Thanks, Keela. All right, and we do have some time to get to some of the questions that were submitted live. So I think you might have already answered this one. Can you please define a provisional ballot one more time? But let's do it one more time anyway. Go ahead, Keela.
All right, so a provisional ballot is a creation of the Help America Vote Act that happened at the turn of the century, of the 21st one. And what that means is that you either are in a precinct that they don't have you on the poll book, that you may not be registered for that precinct, that you went to the wrong place, or that they don't actually have you registered in that jurisdiction at all. And so you're saying, well, yeah, I actually am, and you may have your processes mixed up. So you vote a provisional ballot. That ballot actually is not tabulated until you come to the clerk's office and prove that you were in the right place and that you are registered to vote in the right space. So that is different from an original ballot, or a regular ballot, I should say, that everybody else will cast that because they're in the right location, et cetera. So that's a provisional ballot. But again, because Michigan is a same day registered state, you should not need to cast a provisional ballot, because you can go to your clerk's office if there is an issue that you're not registered in the jurisdiction and register to vote and cast your ballot on election day, or you can go to michigan.gov/vote to make sure that you are in the right place before election day, so that you don't have to worry about casting a provisional ballot.
Great. All right, next question. This person asked, I am not aware of a board of canvassers at the township or city level in my county, just the county board of canvassers. Does this vary from county to county?
That's a great question. And I'll take that back to our board of elections to make sure that we have that right. I do know that there's a county board of canvassers and our state board of canvassers, but let me just double check on that. I might have gotten that a little bit mixed up, but we will post your question and the answer online.
Great, thanks, Keela. Next question, can I register for a particular political party like Democratic or Republican? And if so, how do I do that?
No, we do not have that process here in Michigan. So that nobody registers for a specific party here in Michigan. You just affiliate yourself by attending meetings or however else you affiliate with a political party. So there's not like, unlike in other states where you actually say that I am a member of, or you check mark that and register, when you register to vote, that I'm a member of X party or Y party. We don't have that process here in Michigan.
Great. And we have time for one more question. And I think this is a question we've gotten every session. Will there be a recording available of today's event? And the answer is yes, there will be. We will send out a follow-up email to everyone who signed up to attend today's session or subscribed for emails containing the recording and replay of this session and all of our other sessions we've held so far.
Sarah?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So thank you to my wonderful colleagues who were able to get in contact with our Board of Elections. So it was my mistake. I tripped up and was talking too fast. We have our county boards and we have our state canvassers. There's not one on the city and township level. So thank you for the question to make sure that we cleared that up. But yes, just on the county level and on the state level, not the city and the township. Thank you very much to my colleagues for getting that straight for me.
Great. Thanks, Keela. Appreciate that. All right, well, that's all the time we have today. Again, if you submitted a question and your question was not answered live, we will follow up with additional resources and answers to frequently asked questions that you can explore to find an answer to your question. Thanks again so much, everyone. And don't forget, next Tuesday, August 2nd, polls are open for the Michigan primary election from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you have questions about your voter information, your clerk's office location, your registration status, or your polling place location, visit michigan.gov/vote. Thanks again, and take care, everyone. Be well, and happy Election Day.